Hey, what's up folks? This is Ola and I'm sounding a bit depressed because I just recorded this tutorial and then forgot to turn on my microphone. So, what are we doing today? I'm going to try and sound a bit more excited. I cracked some banging jokes, there were some delightful anecdotes, and all those are lost in the ether now. So I'm going to start again from scratch. And today we're going to be going over 3D layers. Hopefully though third time round I'm going to be so much more efficient and better at telling you shit that you're not even going to mind. So what I'm going to do today is explain the difference in After Effects between purely 2D, purely 3D and the kind of 2.5D features of After Effects. Now if this all is confusing to you, that's fine, because that's why I'm here to dispel a lot of these things. So what I'm going to do is make you two solids here, and I'm going to make this one a darker blue, the second one, and I'm going to change this from active camera to custom view. Now what does this do? Not much apparently, but if you turn these two layers into 3D layers, suddenly stuff happens. So by stuff I mean we're going to see these layers from a slightly different angle now. I'm going to change this back to classic because I've got it on the wrong. Ignore what I've just done, I'll explain that in a minute. So we have this layer behind and this layer at the front, and I've got my select tool, which means I can just move them around like so, in front, behind, and that's all good. So custom view allows you to use this camera tool, so you can pan around your stuff. You can, if you press C again, move around, pan left and right, zoom in and out, all that good stuff. So this is impossible to do again if these are made to 2D, because your custom view will not work because there's nothing 3D in the scene. Make this 2D and you are buzzing. So what I'm going to do is move this second layer back, and obviously, as I explained before, the difference between a 2D and a 3D layer is you can move things up and down, and right, but as soon as you press 3D you get this extra dimensionality. You get to rotate that way and all that stuff. So the first thing I'm going to show you is that you can make a light when you have 3D layers, and a light, and that's a solid, I apologize, layer, new, light, and I'm going to make a point light for now because they're easiest. And as you can see, I've made a yellow light which is making our layers green, and why this happens is because our layers are blue, our light is yellow, and when those two mix together you get green. So I'm just going to demonstrate some of the simpler things that are dug away in material options. Now material options appears when you have a 3D layer. If I get rid of that, material options will disappear. You're going to have to take my word for it because I don't want to waste any more time. So ambient doesn't really do much, not with this kind of light anyway. Diffuse shows you how soft the material is when it accepts the light. So having a more diffuse material will have a softer fall off, and your material will be a lot brighter. The specular intensity is the brightness of the hotspots. If I put that right up, and then the shininess is how concentrated that hotspot is. So if you bring it all the way to 0, you're going to get this really wide reflection, and then if you bring it all the way to 100, if I move my camera around, you see we're getting almost like a mirror-like effect from where it's reflecting the light. And metal will change the color of the specular based on whether it's the color of your light or the color of your material. So hopefully all that stuff makes sense, and you can play with the different kind of looks that you can get from this material. You can also by default your material will accept lights. If you turn this off, your material will still be 3D, but it just won't accept light. It will completely ignore that light, and you can turn that on and off here. Because sometimes you want your LED to be 3D and there's a light in there, but you don't want it to accept the light, you just want it to be blue like it is here. So just good to know that that exists as an option. Next we can create a camera. So if I go to layer, new, now at the moment, because I'm using custom view, and custom view there's 3 views, and you can view from, basically it's 3 different places in your scene where After Effects will remember where you've put this little custom camera. So if I put one, so by default this one's above, so if I move it all the way up but I go back to the other one, After Effects is going to remember where we were looking at it from. which is kind of cool. But if you want more control and a more like specific place in your scene, if we go back to active camera, when I make a new camera, and I'm just gonna make this like 50, hit OK. So it's gonna seem like not much has happened. But if we go back to our custom view now, we're gonna see that there's something extra in our scene, and that's the camera. And by default, the camera will look exactly into the middle of your composition, which is where this square is, because I haven't moved it. If I zoom out with my custom view, you'll see that's where my camera resides. However, if I go to the transform position of my camera, you'll see I can move it forwards and backwards. Oops, I've got rid of it there. Forwards and backwards. It has a point of interest, which is where it's looking. And so this doesn't appear to be doing much, but if I was in the active camera, which is this one, and I was moving the point of interest, you'd see exactly what I was doing here is this, basically. So hopefully that makes sense. And if you have more than one camera, you can switch to the camera just by selecting it from here. Active camera will always select the highest camera in your hierarchy. So if I have 3 cameras, it'll just select the top one as the one which we're looking through. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, this is where things kind of get confusing, because even though After Effects is 3D, if I make an effect like fractal noise, you know, which is an effect which looks very 3D. So we've got like 3D looking, you know, clouds, and you can get those to move around. But if I move my camera around, so if I press C, you'll find that essentially After Effects just creates this effect on a flat plane. And as soon as we move to the side, we're not going to see it, because it's essentially an effect on a card. There's literally nothing 3D about this. However, due to the magic of plugins, we do have some plugins which allow us to view in 3D. Now, it's weird in the way they work. I have one called Mia, which is by Trapcode, and if I just drop this on here, we'll see we have this kind of weird 3D effect. Now I'm going to get rid of my light for this because we don't need it. Now, as you can see here, we've got this 3D geometry, but if I move around it to the side, we'll see that we're still getting the same problem. It's kind of like 3D, but it really isn't. However, if I turn off the 3D capabilities of this layer, it's going to understand suddenly, and I'm going to hide this back layer, and what I'm going to do is make this the size of the layer. So I'm going to Control-Shift-Y or Command-Shift-Y in the Mac. I'm going to make it comp size. And now when I'm in my active camera and I move around, you'll see we can move all the way around the shape like we would expect to with a 3D shape. Now, why is this? Because I've got my layer turned on 2D, right? I don't have it. If I turn it onto 3D, I'm still getting this problem. So you might think that's a bit backwards, because surely why is it working when I turn the 3D off? And that's just because this plugin Mia is built to work with After Effects cameras, and that's something you're just going to have to learn on a plugin by plugin basis. Most of the time you're going to have to remember that you know, you're just looking at a 2D card like I showed you earlier with the fractal noise, and the effect is just slapped onto it and you can't move around the actual effect in the plugin. However, with the Mia plugins and, you know, Element by Video Copilot, you can pan around this, but essentially it's still happening on a 2D card, so it's kind of like got its own 3D space but within the actual plugin here. So that's kind of confusing, but if you can get your head around that, then you'll be flying. Last but not least, I'm going to show you that After Effects kind of has some 2.5D options in terms of like what it can and can't do. Now, what do I mean by this? If I go back to my active camera, which is this one, and make this layer 3D, so let's look at it from this angle, right? So as I've just explained, you can't do anything other than pan around this, right, at the moment. However, there is, if you change the renderer from classic to ray trace 3D, it does add the option to slightly, if we come to the geometry, and just be aware this is really slow. So we've seen the material options, but we now have geometry options, and this allows us to curve our layer, as you can see here. So if I change the segments up here, you'll see now I'm curving my layer. Now this is a flat color at the moment, so it's kind of confusing. So let me add a ramp to this, free color ramp. And hopefully now this is kind of like, if I move the points of this effect around slightly, you're gonna hopefully start to appreciate what's going on, which is, if I look at it from above, this layer is actually being bent in 3D space now, which is what I said it couldn't do, but After Effects can do this if you change the ray tracer to that. But that's about as far as it goes. You can basically bend layers forwards and backwards, but it's better than nothing, you know. However, we can take this a step further, because After Effects can do sort of 3D, but only on two things in the program, and those things are text and shape layers. So let me make a shape layer. Hopefully you watch the tutorials that I've done on shapes. If not, I guess go back and watch them. So I'm going to make a star here, and if you caught me doing this at the start of the tutorial, you'll probably know what's coming. So I'll make a star, and if we come out of the contents but go into transform, nothing's there. We hit 3D, suddenly we've got geometry options, but now you'll see we've got even more options. So we've got extrusion depth. What does this do? Well, this actually extrudes our star outwards. So as you can see now, we have a genuine, if I pan around this, and it's a bit slow to update because After Effects is not a 3D program, but we have a 3D star with a bevel, and you can change the angle of the cap. And at the moment it's very flatly shaded, but if you throw some lights in there, you can actually get some pretty cool looking 3D objects. So it's kind of cool, and it's better than nothing. And you can create like a bevel and then put a flat 2D texture on top of it, and it will kind of look like, I've seen people make really convincing iPhones using this technique. And you can also do this with text. So just to show you that real quick, 3D text, move that into the middle, scale this down a bit, make it 3D. Geometry options, again, extrude, and we're looking at this from the wrong side, so press C to change that camera tool, pan around, and there you have it. At the moment it's really hard to read because it's really flat lighting, because we have no lights in here, but throw some lights in there and you know, you'll be buzzing. Let me just throw one in here real quick just to show you the effect. Layer new light. I'm going to make this white, I guess. Let's make this point light, or maybe a spotlight. And you can see now that you can get some kind of interesting stuff going on by, you can maybe like move the light across the text and pick up some of the sides and the highlights. And this is where you start to play with the caps, because you'll actually be able to see them. So yeah, that's an introduction to 3D in After Effects. I hope this kind of demystifies some of what you can and can't do in After Effects, and yeah, hopefully this is the start of you guys just messing around. And I know there's kind of confusion between the two and the 3D things in terms of certain plugins, but hopefully I explained that in a way you guys understood. If not, leave me a comment and I'll try and get back to you. Thanks for watching, guys. Like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in the next lesson. Hopefully I recorded the audio this time, or else I'm going to scream. See you later.